Class before. I'm Bruce Bradway. I've been at Dene College for 7 years, teaching in the psychology department. I taught this class before when I taught at Ashford University in Clinton, Iowa. Um, so I've taught this class to a lot of different people. Um, We had social workers in that class. We had psychology majors, of course. There were nurses in there. There were education majors. Everybody needed to take a class in diversity, so I was tapped to do that. Let me show you what you need to do to pass this class. Let me go to online here. Let me go online and I'll show you your class. I'll show you the website. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is the assignments page. You have the syllabus here if you want to read it. This is for the library paper. It's due sometime. I don't know. Turn it in whenever you get it done. The topic I want you to talk about is another native nation, not the Dene people. I, we get a lot of information. Fifth floor gives us just tons of information about you guys. So let's talk about another tribe. Let's talk about another native nation out there. There's 574, as it turns out, and about half of them live on reservations somewhere. This is my third tribal college. I taught at Fort Belknap, which is now Ani Nakota College up in Montana, and also Salish Kootenai College on the Flathead Reservation up in Montana. So this is my third reservation, tribal college. This is my third tribal college. What else can I tell you? So why don't you go ahead and write a paper about another native nation, um, get into what they're all about, the information you have about yourselves, the information you get in all of those classes, those Dene study classes. Of course, you don't have to get that in depth. I mean, it's only a 5-page paper. But find out whatever you can about a select group other than your own. Um, if you want to pick another Southwest native nation, that's fine. There's lots. About half of all people that of American Indian ancestry are live in the Southwest, as surprising as that is. So lots of choices, I guess. What did I read yesterday? Oh, about 10% of the population in New Mexico is American Indian. So there you go. Okay, so what do we need to do to pass this class? I know it's only an 8-week class. This is 15 weeks of material that we're jamming into 8 weeks. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 8 weekly tests for about 20 points apiece. The library paper, of course, there are discussion questions. And one of the things that I want you to do, the first 4 weeks, I want you to do a synopsis about another native nation. If all of us, yeah, there's about 15 or 16 people, I think, in this class. If all of you, not me, if all of you do a synopsis on the different native nation, then that'll be about 50 or 60, possibly. Uh, I didn't I didn't give this class its name. It was given to the class by Manasseh Begay. Um, so we've got the 8 weekly discussions. We've got a weekly quiz. The quiz, all of this stuff's going to come out of the PowerPoints. Um, I wrote PowerPoints come from a book called Race, Ethnicity, Gender, and Class by Joseph Healy. Joseph Healy is a sociologist and anthropologist who lives in Virginia, Newport News, Virginia. He teaches at Christopher Newport in Virginia. The book Manasseh picked was by Diller. It was I can't remember the title of it. It's in the syllabus, but we're not going to use that book. If you haven't bought it yet, don't, because we're not going to use it. I'm going to refer to it from time to time when I'm putting my lectures together, in order to make sure that I'm giving you the information. The information that I'm giving you from Healy is similar to the information that you would have gotten from Diller. Diller is also a sociologist, and I'm not exactly sure how Manasseh picked out that text, but we're going to go ahead and with the lectures that I've already put together. I put this together in 2015, 2016, so it's a little dated. Not too bad. The information should pretty much be the same. If you find that I'm not giving you the information that you want or that you need to contact me, and we'll see if we can adjust things. Um, you have copies of all the PowerPoints except the last one. Yeah, there's one that's missing. It has to do with the women's movement, and I haven't quite finished that one yet. It ended with good news in 2013. Of course, we've had bad news since then. Talks about Roe v. Wade and whatnot. And of course, Roe v. Wade has been overthrown. I'm sorry, it has been discarded by the Supreme Court, and now the states are trying to decide. The abortion issue, of course, this election has to do with one of the things it has to do with is that one of the senators has proposed a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks, and that's one of the issues of the election that's coming up in about 4 or 5 weeks. I am a poll worker, so I will be gone that day. It'll be a Tuesday. I think it's the 8th of November. So I will be working at the polls from 6 o'clock in the morning until we finish, probably around midnight or so. A lot of fun. I get to see a lot of people, and hopefully there won't be any problems. Okay, so that's how you pass the class. Quizzes, library paper, and discussions. Um, okay, one thing about my classes, I don't have due dates on anything. I allow you to turn in things. You know, people uh, through the semester, things happen. Okay, things happen, and you fall behind, or you've got to go someplace. There's a ceremony this weekend, and you can't do your homework. And that's fine. I mean, that's the way the world is. They're not on. The world doesn't revolve around my watch, so. I let you turn in things late, and it's fine. It's okay. Just don't turn everything in at the last minute. That, well, go if you have to, go ahead and do it. But I mean, I get a lot of those. I've got about 120 students, and so if everybody did the same thing, I'd be scrambling there at the end of the semester. But I don't count off for late work, so that's just something that you need to know. You don't need to contact me if you fall behind or anything. So there you go. And the lectures are up. Or not the lectures, but the PowerPoints. These are all the PowerPoints. I had to adjust things when I first put this class together for Dean Blackwater. I had it arranged differently, but then I realized that Manasseh wanted you to understand about native nations. Now, one of the reasons that he may have said that is because he has Apache ancestry. I think he's Yikaria, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, and you know, he gets a little upset that people are so unknowledgeable about other tribes, about other native nations. So one of the things that he wanted you to do is to look at other Native nations. If you become a social worker and you're working in Phoenix, you're working in Flagstaff, you may come in contact with somebody from Montana or somebody from Oregon or somebody from Washington. Another indigenous person from the Colville Reservation up in Washington State. I played softball with a guy from Colville. He was funny. He was a lot of fun. Anyway, so yeah, I've been around for a bit in Indian country, or maybe it's Lakota from Oglala Lakota from North Dakota, or somebody from the Cheyenne River Reservation, and who are all Cheyenne River. It's named Cheyenne River, but all the people on the reservation are Sioux. And I use that term not because some of them are Dakota, some of them are Lakota, and some of them are Nakota. The Sioux have or the they have three different language groups, and you probably know all of this. Anyway, that's what we want to do. We want you to be knowledgeable about other indigenous people in the Americas. Or that was his idea, and it sounds like a good idea to me. So the first 4 weeks, what I want you each to do is a synopsis, and I've given you the 7 questions I want you to answer. You need to answer at least 6 of them. The first 6 have to do with what's their common name, what is the name that they call themselves, because a lot of times, just like the Navajo people, are you the Navajo people or are you the Dene? Well, you're Dene to yourselves, but other people refer to you as Navajo. Where did that name come from? Well, we're not exactly sure where it came from, but there's a lot of different speculation as to where it did come from. Another example would be Sioux. I mean, the word Sioux means enemy in Chippewa. So they didn't call themselves enemy. We're going to use this Chippewa word, and we're going to call ourselves the Sioux. Their name for themselves is their language group, the Lakota, Nakota, or Dakota. Um, Comanche is another good example. Comanche is a Ute word that means the people that try to kill us all the time. The name that they have for themselves is the Numina. Um, there's a tribe up in Oregon, Washington, and Montana, the Nez Perce. Nez Perce is a French word that means pierced noses, which strangely enough they never did. But the name they have for themselves is the Nimepu. And this is one of the reasons why they changed the name of Fort Belknap College to Ani Nakota College. The name that they were given by the federal government, by the French, by the people that were around them was Gros Ventre, which means big belly, which they weren't big bellies. They were, when they talked about themselves, they called themselves the Falls people, and the symbol that they made, the hand gesture that they made, was their hand around their sternum and then moving down, and they thought it meant big. They thought they were calling themselves the big bellies. They were calling themselves the Falls people. Anyway, that's the Ani Nakota. I'm sorry, Ani people. Nakota people are they speak a Siouan language, and they are assimilating. The other thing that I want you to tell us is not only their common name and the tribal name, but also the number of people that are enrolled in their tribe. Is the reservation now? Where did they start out when they first started interacting with the Europeans? Were they on the East Coast, or are they in the same place that they've always been? Um, just like the Dene people, you started out right where you are. You are still where you started out when you first made contact with the Spanish and whatnot. The other thing I want you to know is the language family, and there's I don't know 15 or 20 language families, but most indigenous languages in the United States come from a specific source: Algonquian, Muskogean. Siouan, the Crow, strangely enough, speak a Siouan language. The Blackfeet speak an Algonquian language. The Algonquians are an East Coast language primarily. um, so there you go, language family. And then the last one that's 6 questions that you have to answer. And the seventh question is there any other information that a social worker might need to understand who these people are? And so there you go. That's the first 4 weeks. Then the fifth week, you have a question about African Americans. Sixth week, you have questions about either Hispanic Americans or Asian Americans. And then the seventh week, you talk about white people. You have to talk about white people. Oh boy, that's going to be fun. Anyway, and then the eighth week, your discussion question deals with either gender identity or sexual orientation or the women's movement. So there you go. Try to come up with interesting questions so that I would be entertained. No, nothing boring here. We're not going to deal with anything boring. And we're going to deal with some very controversial subjects. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the first chapter. It's about culture and diversity, challenges and benefits. And that is me. I do have a PhD, and I've been at Dene College for 7 years. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me get a drink here before I do get started. There we go. Okay. It's in the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson wrote in 1776, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." He wrote that in the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So let's see if Jefferson lived by what he said in 1776. In 1792, President Washington's Secretary of State, who was Thomas Jefferson, wrote that tobacco was too destructive to the soil, but Monticello, where he lived in Virginia, solvency could be maintained through the production of slaves at a birth rate of 4% per year. In other words, he decided in 1792 that he couldn't make money off of tobacco, and he was up in the mountains, so he really couldn't make money off of cotton. But what he decided to do was to raise African Americans, to raise slaves. So he was using slaves to maintain his farm. His farm was self-sufficient as far as food was concerned, but they couldn't produce enough grain or enough tobacco or enough cotton to maintain the place. So what he did, he bred and sold slaves. So how does that fit with, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal? Well, I guess that makes him a bit of a hypocrite, doesn't it? Diversity is defined as those things that make us different from one another. Race, gender, ethnicity, country of origin, culture, sexual orientation, age. Age, one of the things you need to know, and I'll probably be saying this, I keep saying I'm 72. Well, I'll turn 73 on Wednesday of next week. So this class is supposed to start on the 11th, and the next day I turn 73. So I'm 73. And that has a lot to do with all of this information that I'm giving you because I've lived through a lot of stuff. 73 years of it, as a matter of fact, and I've always been fairly politically astute, watching what was going on. So age has a lot to do with it, values, political affiliations, socioeconomic status, and able-bodiedness. SWO, Porter and Egan, and that is actually done incorrectly. What it should be, wait a second, I'll show you what it should be. This is APA right now. This is the way they do things. Let's take that comma out. If you have more, oops, I'm sorry. If you have more than two authors, you don't have to write them all down. Okay, so there you go. Et al. SWO et al. In 2002 wrote of how individuals look for similarities between themselves and their coworkers despite obvious diversity differences. This they referred to as relational demography. In other words, if I'm a baseball fan and the guy that's sitting next to me is also a baseball fan, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the fact that our similarities, or we're trying to identify our similarities. So there you go. Baseball fan, football fan, whatever. And it doesn't just have to be a sports fan. It can be anything. Maybe, maybe you're a fan of My Little Pony, so you're bronies. That's what they call people who are fans of My Little Pony. Anyway, so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for similarities between ourselves. We're looking for reasons why this person, that I should like this person because of similarities between us. And that's what people do. The United States has a compelling interest to maintain a nation where diversity continues to be important. How can we create equality in a country that is so diverse? And this has been a problem. So when we're talking about another country, we're talking about the Ukraine, or we're talking about Russia, we're talking about Germany or France or England. What we're really talking about is a country where it is fairly homogenous. Almost everybody's the same. If we're talking about Japan, 95% of the people who live in Japan are Japanese. So when the Japanese talk about diversity, they're really not talking about the same thing we are in the United States. And not only that, but what is the percentage now? It's around 70% of the population of the United States are of a European ancestry. But of that European ancestry, look at all the different countries that people come from. Look at all the different cultures that they represent. So even the white people aren't the same. Some people are from England. Some people are from Scotland. Some people are from Ireland. Some people are from France, from Belgium, from Sweden, from Norway, from Germany, from the Ukraine, from Croatia, from Poland. My sister married a man was a second generation Polish immigrant. Um, her kids are named last name Novak. My name is Anglo-Saxon. It's Bradway, which is an Anglo-Saxon name. So lots of different mixtures, lots of different things, lots of different reasons why people potentially don't get along. And we're going to talk about what happened to Yugoslavia when, Yugoslavia, Yugoslavia splintered after the wall came down in 1989. It splintered into all of its little groups: Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, uh, Bosnia. It splintered into all of these little groups where people who had been part of the same country, all of a sudden they were killing each other. They were fighting wars against each other. Why? Because they felt different. They wanted to be a more homogenous country. But this is the way the United States looks. It's tough. It's really tough getting all of these people together, and where everybody works for the common good, and everybody votes in every election. We've got one coming up in 4 or 5 weeks. What is the barriers to realizing this goal? The barriers are that some people think that they're better than other people, that they're from England, their ancestors are from England, so they're better than all the people whose ancestors come from Germany or come from Poland or come from wherever. What are the benefits if we achieve it? Well, the benefits are that we have a country, one of the strongest countries in the world. So possibly it's our diversity that makes us strong. The United States did not develop as a diverse nation. States began with state religions. People immigrated to towns and communities where others like them lived. Many communities are still homogenous in the United States. And I've lived in Mississippi. I've lived in Texas and Oklahoma, in Arizona, of course, but also Washington, D.C. In the Washington, D.C. area, we actually lived in Maryland. Indiana, Iowa, Montana. We've lived all over the United States. We lived in Japan. We lived in Germany. We were military. So one of the things I can tell you is that it gives you a different perspective when you look outside and see what there is out there, and then you come back to where you're from. You can see that there's a lot of crazy stuff that's going on. But when people first started immigrating into the United States, all these crazy Europeans started coming over here. If somebody was Italian, they wanted to live with Italians. If somebody was Irish, they wanted to live with other Irish people. I used to live in Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha, Nebraska, it's a very Catholic town for a lot of different reasons. Well, the main reason is because it had a lot of immigrants coming in, immigrants from Italy, immigrants from the Czech Republic, from the Slovakian Republic, which were Czechoslovakia at the time. But those two people don't really like each other, and here they made a country out of themselves. And then after the wall came down in 1989, they split. They split to the Czech Republic and the Slovakian Republic, as bizarre as that is. And they hate each other. And they lived in Omaha, and they were constantly at each other's throats. Italians, Irish, Polish, these are all the same religion, but they had a difficult time getting along with each other. And this is one of the things that happened, that people would move to communities that were like themselves. And if somebody tried to come in from someplace else, they were actually rejected. And this is one of the reasons why the states became the states that they did. North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland. So if you were Catholic, you moved to Maryland. If you were Quaker, you moved to Pennsylvania. If you were Puritan, you moved to Massachusetts. If you weren't a Puritan and you were in New England, you moved to Rhode Island, because Rhode Island, of course, didn't have a state religion. But it's really kind of bizarre the way the United States formed itself. Diversity is valued in local and global businesses, in educational institutions, in the military, certainly. Diversity has several categories: cognitive diversity, identity, who do you identify with, demographics, and preferences. Cognitive diversity reflects different patterns of thinking, different patterns of analysis, different patterns of perception, and different patterns of point of view. Perspectives, ways of representing and understanding the world. This is the cognitive diversity. These are the perspectives, their ways of representing and understanding the world, the heuristics that you use, the strategies for solving personal problems. These all deal with cognitive diversity, and we're going to talk about some of this as we get into the text. Interpretations, giving meaning to things, events, and experiences. Is how important is Christmas? How important is Easter? How important is what's coming up on Monday is it's Columbus Day. It's Columbus Day for everybody except the indigenous peoples of the Americas, who are not that happy with Columbus and bringing all those Europeans over here, or allowing them all to come in, or whatever. Full moon on Sunday night. Interesting. Anyway, what are we talking about? We're talking about Columbus Day. Interpretations of this day. Is this a good day? Is this a bad day? When I lived in Omaha, I was working at a hospital. I'm a lab tech. I was working at a hospital, and it was St. Patrick's Day. Well, St. Patrick's Day is, it's everybody's holiday. Everybody gets to wear green and have a good time. But about a third of the people at the laboratory where I was working were angry because we were celebrating an Irish holiday. Well, why? It's just a holiday. What? Their interpretation was, they were Scottish. They were of Scottish descent. And their interpretation was that, of course, the Northern Ireland, the Scots and the Irish kind of didn't get along very well. Presbyterians versus Catholics, orange versus green. So that was their interpretation. They didn't want to say anything good about or nice about the Irish. Interpretation of what's happening here. Columbus Day, Columbus Day, it's just a holiday. Come on, you get a day off. So, but this is a negative day as far as you're concerned, as far as Native Americans are concerned. So instead of celebrating Columbus Day, you celebrate American Indian Day or something. Anyway, so that's why our class starts on the 11th instead of the 12th. I'm sorry, on the 11th instead of the 10th. It turns out that I was born on Columbus Day. Geez, should I even be working at a tribal college? That's my birthday. What choice do I have? Oh, I should have told my mother. Wait till tomorrow. Actually, why didn't she have me on the 11th? I was born at like 8 o'clock in the morning. She just had me a little bit early. Just kidding. Anyway, interpretations, predictions, inferences about causes. What causes this? What causes that? Um, and we'll get into that as things go on. Psychology of diversity. Identity diversity represents differences based on sex, on gender orientation, on religion, on race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, and immigrant status. The big one here, and there's a lot of really difficult things to deal with, but the biggest one is religion. Religion has caused more trouble around the world. Catholics versus Protestants, Muslims versus everybody. Everybody seems to hate the Jewish people. Jewish people. What's going on? Why is religion so important? But it is. It's so important that people are willing to kill for religion. Uh, Demographic diversity represents differences between people based on social aspects. Preference diversity reflects differences in taste and value. Fundamental preferences, outcomes we value. Instrumental preferences, how we seek the desired outcomes. So we're talking about, okay. Millam in 2003 suggested a three-tier approach to viewing diversity. Structural diversity, seeing diversity from a numerical and proportional point of view. Diversity-related initiatives, attempting to promote diversity through cultural awareness workshops, ethnic studies courses, and of course, in the this is a tribal college, of course, so we have all these ethnic study courses on a continual basis. But the reality is, you don't have any ethnic study courses that are based on people being Hispanic or people being of European ancestry or people being African American. Those ethnic study courses don't exist at your institution. So, and that's really what they're talking about. Most institutions in the United States, of course, are based on European educational systems, and most of the textbooks are written by people of European heritage. So is that really what we're learning? Are we just learning about white people? I mean, Healy's a white guy. I'm a white guy. When I went to college, I didn't even think about diversity. I did because I was in a dormitory with all the African Americans on campus. Um, this was a constant. But those individuals that were living in the fraternities, all the fraternities were segregated, so it was only just white guys and some Asians. But we weren't really studying ethnic studies. And then when I was a sophomore, the Black Panthers came to campus, and we hired a black professor, black literature professor. Finley Campbell. Oh, he just scared the crap out of just about everybody, and the best class I ever took. I was an English major, so we read books by African American authors. Just fabulous, really fabulous. So what are we talking about? Diversity related initiatives, diversity interactions, interactions between people who are different. And of course, if it's a tribal college, it's pretty much just the guys from the tribe. Not a whole lot of diversity dealing there. All three are interconnected: structural diversity, diversity related initiatives, and diversity interactions. Historically, diversity has dealt with intergroup relations between blacks and whites based on skin color. We're going to talk, and we're going to talk about this bifurcation that we have had in the United States. Uh, since 1619, when the first actually there weren't hardly any white people here then either, but they brought. We're going to talk about the reason they brought Africans to the Americas, but it has to do with skin color. Slavery, of course. Uh, Once slavery ended, the Jim Crow South, and then the Civil Rights Movement, which I became involved with because, as I said, when I was in college, I was in a dormitory, and all the black students on campus were in my dormitory. So there was a lot of interaction taking place, and there were positive interactions. I don't want you to think that we were fighting each other or arguing about anything. We were trying to figure out how everybody could get along as well as we did. This divide between blacks and whites was referred to as the color line by civil rights warrior W.E.B. Du Bois in 1903, which he identified as the leading problem of the 20th century. And it's still going on today. The whole Black Lives Matter movement. I was just reading an article where the Oath Keepers were saying that the reason they went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, 2021 was because they were afraid of the Black Lives Matter movement taking over the country, along with Antifa. Who don't get me started on Antifa. Look it up sometime. Just find out who these guys are. This Antifa people. It's really kind of interesting. They're not there. There's this mystical group that the white supremacists have concocted. There's W.E.B. Du Bois. The interesting thing is that Du Bois is one of my family names, so we don't have any Africans in my. I've had my genetic step checked, my DNA. We don't have any African Americans in the family. No, that's not true. We don't have any. There are no African Americans in my direct ancestry, but we do have African Americans in the family, and potentially he was one of them. He's from the East Coast, and my family started out on the East Coast. Anyway, so it's a possibility that, and we do look a lot alike. Well, I'm not that bald, and I don't have a beard, so. Humanity is a relatively recent species, even comparing the most different looking humans on the planet. Their DNA is 99.9% identical. And this is one of the reasons why DNA studies are not as complex as you would think they are, because all humans have almost the same DNA. No matter whether you're an indigenous person from the Americas, or are you a Frenchman from Paris, or a Russian from Moscow, or a Aleut from Alaska. It doesn't really matter how disparate you are, how far apart you were raised. Our DNA is still almost identical, 99.9%. But that's biology, of course, DNA. And we do look a lot alike. You can see this is a lady from Wales, and this is a lady from West Africa, and this is a Thai, and this is somebody from South Africa. You can see how similar they look. This is a Peruvian who has some degree of American Indian ancestry. Uh, Indigenous peoples from she is potentially has ancestry that is indigenous. Let me say that. How's that? Racial inequality is embedded in and a product of social institutions. The terms we have for race are used because they are socially meaningful. But difference doesn't mean deficit. Just because somebody is different doesn't mean that. Just because they're not like you doesn't mean that that is a negative thing. So requirements for a diversity science: avoid employing and perpetuating an abstract concept of race. Locate the sources of inequality not only in individual minds, but also in the practices, policies, and institutions that they create. And this is one of the things that the Supreme Court has been supposed to do, and that's one of the things that they haven't been doing in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's something that Mrs. Supreme Court Justice Jackson just schooled them on. She just told them, "Hey, look, you're making a mistake. This is not the way. This is not the history that you're talking about. Isn't the history that actually happened." Unearth cultural ideologies that help perpetuate systems of inequalities. Question the idea that being white gives the individual an air of privilege. Investigate the perspectives of both minority and majority group dynamic interactions. So the reality is that if we're going to deal with minority issues, we need to deal with, because we are identifying it as a minority issue, we have to also identify the majority dynamic that created that minority. Document the experiences of groups beyond the black-white binary. And there are a lot of them out there. We may be talking about Black Lives Matter, but the reality is there are also problems dealing with other groups with the dominant population as well. We need to understand people from an Asian ancestry, from a Hispanic ancestry, and what else is there? That's close enough, isn't that, everybody? American Indians, of course, the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Who are Americans? Can you point to one attribute or group that say that this is what an American is? Well, so there are some white supremacists that try to say that being an American means being white. But the reality is, of course, that we are a very diverse country, and by day, we become more and more diverse. And we are the absolute whiteism of the United States is being diluted on a continual basis, and this is probably the way. This obviously is the wave of the future. And I think my brother's in this picture somewhere. Where are you, David? Where are you, David? I don't see him. Oh, he took the picture. Okay, that makes sense. According to the 2013 census estimates, 50.8% of the population in the United States is female. So that's almost 51%. According to the 2013 census estimates, only 49.2% of the people in the United States are male. Oh, look how sad they all look. Oh, they're a minority population. According to the 2007 census estimates, 77.7% of all Americans are white. 1.2% of the Americans are American Indian or Alaska Native. 5.3% of all Americans are Asian. 0.2% of all Americans are Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. I know that lady. This lady right here. Maybe not. 17.1% of all Americans are Hispanic. 62.6% of all Americans are non-Hispanic white. 13.2% of all Americans are black. 12.9% of the people in the United States are foreign born, as interesting as that is. Most of them, and most of the people that are foreign born do actually come from Mexico. And we're going to talk about that later. According to the 2007 census estimates, 51% of Americans are Protestant, and these are the largest denominations. So if you don't know anything about religion, then don't worry about this. But Baptists represent 17.2% of the population. Methodists represent 6.2% of the population. Lutherans, 4.6%. Non-denominational but still Protestant is 4.5%. Pentecostals, 4.4%. And Presbyterians, which my wife is a Presbyterian, 2.7%. According to the 2007 census estimates, 23.9% of the American population are Catholic. And this is St. Paul's Mission in Hayes, Montana. This was on the reservation where I used to work. I worked there for 10 years, so if I talk about Fort Belknap, that's why I'm talking about it, because I actually worked there for 10 years, taught at their tribal college. 1.7% of the church are Church of the Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons, only 1.7%. 0.6 are Orthodox, and there are lots of Orthodox groups. There's Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox. The best man at my wedding was Serbian Orthodox, and his father was a Serbian Orthodox minister. And he, and I asked him, I, I asked Pete, can your dad come down for? Where were we? Oh, can he come over from Dallas? He lived in Dallas. Can he come over and marry my wife and I? And he said no. It would take you 6 months to get approved by the Serbian Orthodox Church. Anyway, not important. Syriac, Orthodox, Ukrainian, and also Coptic is an Orthodox group. Syriac is Syria, people living in Syria. 1.7% of the U.S. population are Jewish. 0.7% are Buddhist. 0.6% are Muslim. 0.4% are Hindus. 0.7% are Unitarians and other liberal faiths. My sister was a libertarian or a Unitarian. 0.7% are New Age faiths, which include Wiccans, pagans, and Druids. As weird as that seems, these are the crystal guys. 16.9% are unaffiliated and identify themselves as either atheists, agnostics, or nothing in particular. And that's where I fit in. I'm one of these 16.9%. And the reason I have a golfer here is because most of these guys go to church on Saturday or Sunday. Most of these guys go to church on Saturday or Sunday. And which is Protestants and Catholics go to most Protestants and Catholics go to church on Sunday, but these guys go to the golf course on Sunday when everybody else is in church. Great time to go to the golf course if you're a golfer. I haven't golfed in a long time, so that's not me. According to the 2013 census estimate, 20.7% of the population in the United States speaks a language other than English in their home. 20.7%. That's 1 out of every 5 people. 29% of the people in the West speak another language. That's you guys. You guys live in the West. Only 7% of the people in the Midwest speak another language at home, and this is one of the reasons why people from Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Kentucky, these people don't have a clue what's going on. They don't understand what's happening in the West, where 1 out of every 3 people, 3 out of every 10 people doesn't speak English in their home. They hardly ever see it in the Midwest, so they don't really understand what's going on out there. A lot of people. 8.5% of the people in the United States speak no English at all. That's almost 1 out of every 10. Can't speak English. 10.7% of the people in the United States speak Spanish as a primary or a secondary language, which is kind of cool if you think about it, being able to speak more than one language. I wish I could. I have smatterings of German and smatterings of Spanish and smatterings of Latin, but I can't speak any of those languages fluently. I can read German and I can read Spanish, but I can't speak it. Anyway, not important. According to the 2013 census estimates, the median income in the United States is $52,250, which is about how much money I make at Dene College. For whites, it's $57,009. For blacks, it's $33,321. This is the median income for black families and white families. For Asian families, it's $68,636. For Hispanic families, it's $39,005. For American Indian and Alaska Natives, it's only $36,252. And you can see what happens to you when you have a doctorate degree, and I'm way down here. That's okay. I'm pretty happy where I am. According to the 2013 census estimates, 15.4% of the people in the United States live below the poverty line. 10% of all white people live below the poverty line, 27% of blacks, 13% of Asians, 24% of Hispanics, American Indian, Alaska Native, 29.2%. Now I know it looks like the group with the fewest poor people are the white people, but since they represent 77% of the population, they are the largest group of poor people in the United States. Even though some politicians are trying to paint poverty as a minority issue, the reality is there are more poor white people than there are poor blacks, Asians, Hispanics, and American Indians all combined. So it's a incorrect picture that they are painting. According to the 2013 census estimates, 35.5% of the people in the United States are low middle class, family income below $35,000 per year. 44.2% of people in the United States are upper middle class, family income below $100,000 per year. Actually, with my wife, we are here. 35% of the people in the United States are upper class. I call us upper class, doesn't really fit. We do have incomes above $100,000 a year, with my income and her retirement paying. I'm not sure where it all goes. Oh, she said I could buy a new computer. I taught 20 hours over the summer, and so I got my check. I got my check, and she said, "Well, you can spend money and buy a new computer." So I'm still waiting. Anyway, that was a big check. Working class families are usually families whose major breadwinner works in a blue collar or manufacturing job. Number of manufacturing jobs in the United States began expanding in the 1960s and really didn't begin decreasing until about 2000, even though that people were starting to complain right in here between the 1980s and the 2000s. A lot of these manufacturing jobs went overseas. Since 2000, the United States has lost manufacturing jobs at an alarming rate and have rapidly returned to the levels seen in 1960, when the population was 179,000. Now, one of the things that happened, I'm from Muncie, Indiana, and that whole area of Indiana, east central Indiana, used to have factories everywhere. Just most of it had to do with the automobile industry. Almost all those factories have closed. So when I was in school from 1950. I started in 1954, didn't I? Yeah, I started in 1954. Uh, and then I graduated from high school in 1967. We were educated to become factory workers, so weren't really giving us a whole lot of information. There wasn't a college prep high school course. It was them primarily wanting us to either become farmers or to move into the factories, and they needed factory workers. So they were trying to educate us to be factory workers. Some of us didn't make it into the factory. I went to college, broke everybody's heart. But all those factories closed. So all those people that I was educated with, all those people in my high school graduating class that went into the factory right away, they don't have jobs now. Well, they're in their 70s, so they should be retired anyway. But the whole point is that a lot of those manufacturing jobs went overseas. And that really stung the people that lived in my area, where I was raised. If the current trends in the United States stay the same, non Hispanic whites will make up less than 50% of the U.S. population by 2050. If current trends in the United States stay the same, American Indians and African Americans will remain stable in their relative size. And what was that? 1.2%? Is that what the American Indians were? Where are you? American Indians, 1.2% American Indians. Where's African Americans? There we are, 13.2%. So you guys are going to stay the same. White people are going to decline. So what's going on? The current trends in the United States stay the same. Asian and Pacific Islanders, who account for 2% of the population in 1980, are projected to become 10% of the population by 2050. That's Asians and Pacific Islanders. If current trends in the United States stay the same, Hispanic Americans, who surpassed African Americans as the majority minority in 2002, will account for 25% of the U.S. population by 2050. So what's happening is the Hispanic population is expanding, white population is shrinking. You guys are going to stay the same. African Americans are going to stay the same. Asian and Pacific Islanders are going to expand as well. Just as finding a couple from different faiths or from different countries of origin was rare in 1900, putting such importance in faith or country of origin is rare today. To cloud the demographics of the future will be the prevalence of mixed race couples that may prove to be the majority of the relationships in 2050. Estimates are that 21% of the marriages will be mixed by 2050. And of course, I can remember when I started dating, when I was thinking about getting married, there were people that told me I needed to stay with my own kind. That's what they were telling me. And of course, my first wife was my high school sweetheart. Big mistake. Anyway, not important. That's the way it was back in 1967 when I graduated from high school. When people first started thinking about getting married, they weren't looking for anybody that was different than them. They wanted they wanted people to get married to people that were like you. Minority groups can be numerical. Whites are the majority group in the United States, accounting for of every three people in the United States. And there you go, 2 out of every 3. Minority can also describe a group that has numerical superiority, but are disadvantaged or live in inequality. Women in the United States are the majority gender, but they maintain minority status because of suffrage, wage, and hiring practices in the United States since its inception. And this has been a constant fight. We're going to talk about the women's movement. That's the last thing we're going to talk about is the women's movement. But alcohol was a huge question, and suffrage, and wages have been a huge problem for women in the United States because it's a male-centric society. But women want that changed, and we do have a female vice president. Hillary Clinton ran for president in 2016. She didn't win, but who knows what's going to happen in 2024. The members of minority groups share a visible trait of characteristic that differentiates them from other groups. Minority group is a self-conscious social unit. It's something that people recognize, just like these black ducklings and this yellow duckling. Membership in the group is usually determined at birth. Members tend to marry within the group. The most defining characteristic of a minority is the disability and disadvantage of surviving as unequal. This disability can range from severe to fairly inconsequential. The worst, of course, is genocide, where they try to kill off an entire population. The next is enslaving a group and making them unequal, making them a minority. The next is exploitation. And of course, the last is slight irritation. And this is slavery, of course, not genocide, but this is slight irritation. She's patting him on top of the head. These disadvantages can be severe or slight and encompass wealth, jobs, housing, political power, police protection, and health care. And I, she's sticking her nose up. That's why I put that picture in there. Sometimes the group the term subordinate group is used instead of minority. The majority group is also called the core or the dominant group, and of course that's what we have done. I guess all white people have to slick back their hair, own a mustache, and smoke pipes. A second defining characteristic of a minority group is a visible trait or characteristic that is viewed negatively, whether it has to do with language, religion, speech pattern potentially, dress, skin color, stature, facial features. You can use a lot of different things to denigrate someone, to try to make them feel subordinate. And these are all ways that you can do it. What is a minority? Language, religion, speech patterns, dress style. These are Aborigines from Irian Jaya. They run around naked most of the time. Skin color, stature. These are African pygmies. And that's a normal. That's an average size to European. Facial features, and these are Aborigines from Australia. People defined by cultural traits are known as ethnic minority. This is a Scotsman. These are Hasidic Jewish children in New York City. They don't cut their sideburns. They can't cut their sideburns. Groups defined for their physical characteristics are referred to as racial minorities. Usually the characteristics that set one person apart from another tend to be fairly trivial. Things like skin color, facial features, stature. Most characteristics that separate groups were focused on by the dominant culture, which makes them important to the group, but insignificant to, say, the scientific community. The scientific community goes, skin color means nothing. Look, we already talked about biology. 99.9% of your DNA is exactly the same. So why in the world are you focusing on skin color or on the size of somebody's ears? Or their height, or the size of their feet. Why are you doing this? It doesn't make any sense. These are totally insignificant. Part of the problem, of course, is that factors that set them apart from the dominant culture make the minority a self-conscious social unit. So they recognize themselves as being different. This is a third characteristic of a minority, the fact that the minority recognizes and becomes self-conscious about the difference between them and somebody else. This social isolation tends to bring about strong intergroup bonds and a sense of solidarity. And I'm not sure what this was. Looks like these are leather-wearing people. And these are mohawk-wearing people. Mohawk hairdos. I think those are taped on, though. Minority status tends to be an ascribed status. This means that the status is acquired by being born into that group. It is usually involuntary. It is usually for life, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. The last minority trait is that minorities tend to marry within their own group. Were still some states that made interracial marriage or miscegenation illegal into the 1960s. So, despite the fact that slavery ended in 1865, there were still laws on the books in some of the southern states that made interracial marriage illegal. And there was a movie that just came out not very long ago about the miscegenation trials in Virginia, where a white man married a black woman, and she was arrested, I think. She was arrested. I haven't seen the movie, but it's really kind of interesting. This happened in 1958. So it wasn't until the 1960s that the Supreme Court said, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. We have to throw these laws out. It facilitates adaptability, flexibility, and creativity in thinking and acting, the benefits of diversity. It produces better citizenship in in a more diverse world. It fosters human capital, the resources people bring to enterprises by engaging participation of marginalized groups. It is morally correct and consistent with the core U.S. values of equity and fairness. So why in the world do we fight against diversity? Why isn't diversity a universal in the United States? And the reality is that it probably is more acceptable than we think, because what we're doing is focusing on the negative groups. We're focusing on the white supremacists. The White Aryan Nation, Ku Klux Klan. We're focusing on these individuals. And one of the things that has happened in the last 5 years or so is that because our president was a divisive president and he focused on all of these things and he supported these strange conspiracies, these ideas that some people are inferior to others, because he supported that, it became more of a focus. It became more of a focus in the United States. Before, I mean, there are a lot of people that have. I mean, Obama was elected president in when was he elected president? 2008. Was it 2000? Yeah, 2008. He's president for 8 years, and he won by a landslide the second time, despite the fact that the crazy people who don't like black people for one reason or another, they came out against him, and they created a whole party, the Tea Party, that was supposed to overthrow, this whole idea of a black man becoming president of the United States. They're gone. I mean, well, the Tea Party's not gone. They're still around. But, I mean, they created a whole different wing of the conservative Republican Party. Okay. Some people feel that diversity is undesirable. Diversity can be exclusionary. It defines which differences matter on the basis of convenience or ideology. It violates the principle of reward based on merit, meritocracy. It highlights differences, fostering stereotypes, stereotyping and driving people farther apart. Now we can talk about diversity. We can talk about segregation, we can talk about different problems, but I mean, it's not just a black-white issue. It's also a religious issue. There have been attacks on synagogues. The one synagogue in Pittsburgh was attacked. It's not just a racial issue. It's not just an ethnic issue. It is also a religious issue. And of course, there are people that hate this or hate that or hate something else. Um, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense in a diverse society like ours. And so what we need to do is promote diversity. It didn't make any sense when I went to campus in 1967. When I went to I went to Wabash College. You could either live in the dorm or you could live in a fraternity. The fraternities were all segregated except for one. One fraternity wasn't segregated. They had one African American in their fraternity. So all of the African Americans on campus had to live in the dormitories because they couldn't live in, except for that one fraternity, they couldn't live in the fraternities. And this doesn't make any sense. Why, in a world of diversity, why in the world would you support something like segregated fraternities? It just didn't make any sense. And so that became a direction of my life. I was going to make sure that segregation, I wanted everything integrated. That was a direction of my life. I joined the military. Military is a very integrated society. It was easy when I was in the military because in the military they can order you not to be a racist. And if you are a racist, they kick you out. So, I mean, it was easy in the military. But after I got out in 1983, and I went into communities in Mississippi and Nebraska, where else were we? California. You saw this. My wife didn't see it because my wife was in the military, but I saw it because I was in the community, and of course this is something I tried to deal with. Do we promote the multicultural perspective or the colorblind perspective? Pointing out differences in the multicultural, and this is a question that comes up in psychology all the time. We need to promote, we need to do away with segregation, but do we promote diversity or do we promote multiculturalism? Pointing out differences in the multicultural approach may lead to more stereotyping. My idea is that, and this is something I don't agree with Healy. Healy is talking about diversity as it needs to be colorblind, but the reality is that people are proud of who they are. People are proud of being, Welsh or being African American or Black Lives Matter or being Hispanic. There's no reason why we should pretend that everybody's the same because we're not. I mean, we all have different cultural aspects, and in order to support that cultural aspect, that's multiculturalism, and that's what is supported in psychology, and it's been supported that way since 2000. They decided that they would make that an issue in the APA, the American Psychological Association. So multiculturalism is the direction that psychology is going. Ignoring differences with the colorblind approach is associated with more prejudicial behavior against individuals. The colorblind approach, however, is essential for achieving a true meritocracy. And of course, there are things that we need to argue about as far as that's concerned, and we're going to continue the argument. Your first discussion question has to do with doing a synopsis about a native nation. So pick wisely. You can go on Google to find these things. You can Google native nations or American Indians or whatever, and they'll give you a list. There's 574 native nations in the United States. And like I said, about half of them are connected to a reservation. The reason that there aren't half of 574 would be 287. 287. Why aren't there 287 reservations? As with so many things, there are a lot of reservations that have more than one native nation on them. Fort Peck, for example, in Montana, has 4 different Siouan tribes. 3 of them are Lakota, and 1 of them is Nakota. The 3 affiliated tribes, some of these reservations have 3 and 4 different groups on them. Fort Belknap has an Algonquian-speaking native nation, and they also have a Nakota-speaking or Siouan-speaking, all on the same reservation. And this is one of the things that they did. Colville has like 7. Salish Kootenai on the Flathead Reservation. That's two different tribes. But there's also the Coeur d'Alene are on the Flathead Reservation. Well, so what am I talking about? What I'm saying is some of these guys, so they force different groups to be on the same reservation. And a lot of times they were blood enemies, as odd as that may seem. The Northern Cheyenne Reservation is the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, but it's connected, not well, it's right next to the Crow Reservation, as weird as that seems. Now, why in the world would you put these two blood enemies right next to each other? You know, why would you do that? Because you're hoping that they will remain blood enemies and they'll kill each other. American government is and the American military and the what was the War Department, which is now the Department of Defense, has not always been the nicest people in the world. Anyway, so the first question is to come up with a synopsis of a native nation. If you have any complaints, if I say anything controversial, please tell me about it. I slip from time to time. You have to remember I am 73 in what, 4 days? So, okay. So, okay, I'll talk to you guys next week. We'll tackle chapter 2 next week.